Firstly, a big yasher koach to all the to the organizers. Just this pa'ula alone should be enough to tip the scales, as Rabbi Kanta said, the tipping point. We shouldn't have to complete the full 24 hours. We can go straight to Yerushalayim and be together with Moshiach now. I want to say a special thank you to Rabbi Butman for using a moshel which is so close to home here in South Africa. You think 24 hours without power is a big deal. Over here, it's every 24 hours. We have many rolling power outages in South Africa. You're not allowed to use the word blackout. It's a little bit offensive. So we have power outages. And if you think that in 24 hours people get used to it, it's a fascinating thing, because the power grid is not strong enough necessarily to support all of the demand of the country. And so often you have the power off for 4 hours at a time, just 4 hours. And the fascinating thing about human psychology is at the end of those 4 hours, if the power doesn't come back on exactly when it was scheduled to come back on, people begin to panic. It's never coming back on again. So the psychology of people is it takes far less time for us to get used to a situation, to adapt. I think the coronavirus is another good example. People start to talk about a new normal. And chas v'shalom, we should never talk about this being a new normal. And equally, we should never talk about going back to normal. Right at the beginning, everybody's saying, we cannot wait to go back to normal. Jewish people don't go back. If anything, we should go forward to something that is greater than the normal that we had previously. Before coming directly to your question, I have to share a story that happened exactly a week ago at our Moshiach Suda. It was a smaller Moshiach Suda because people are still a little bit wary about coming together. And it's just recently that they've relaxed the lockdown restrictions. So we had it outdoors, socially distanced, the whole thing. And one of the guys brought his daughter. He brought his 6-year-old daughter to the Moshiach Suda. They're a divorced couple, so she spends half the time with her mother, who is in no way connected to her Yiddishkeit. And the girl was sitting there, and we were sharing Vertlach and singing Nigunim, and then this kid puts up a hand and she says, is Moshiach going to come, or are we just going to sit here and talk? And I thought, this is the Nakuda. Everything else is detail. She got directly the innocence and naivete of a child. She got directly to the point. I was very touched by that. And I thought, halavai, we had that same kind of attachment and belief and simplicity. Obviously, Moshiach Suda. What else? Obviously, he has to come. This past Shabbos, the father came to shul, and he told me what happened when they got home. They got home after Pesach, and his daughter had to phone her mother, as she would always do at the end of every Shabbos, or every Yom Tov, just to check in, tell her mother what's happening. She calls her mother. The minute the mother answers the phone, she bursts out crying. 6-year-old kid. Moshiach didn't come. The mother had no idea what she was talking about. Absolutely didn't know what. The kid is crying on the phone. Moshiach didn't come. And dad said that when Moshiach comes, we don't have to be afraid of snakes anymore. And Moshiach didn't come. So here we are on the 30th anniversary of Koyach Nisan. And it's beautiful. We have this incredible get-together, which not only includes the people who are participating now, but it's recorded, so it will be replayed multiple times. But chas v'shalom, that we should think, we've done it. We've done what we had to do. It was the date. The date came. We gave it our attention. We paid a tribute to the Rebbe's call, Tut alts was ken, and that's it, we're here. Somehow we have to find that 6-year-old inside of us that really believes that Moshiach should come right now, and if not, it's devastating to the point that we cry. So, Butman, your question is an interesting question. How do you change? How do you change the psychology? How do you break yourself out of a particular way of thinking that has pervaded the whole of our history, really? It's a tenfold what the Yidden had in Mitzrayim. They were 210 years, and they had to get their head around the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim. That means that they were slaves. Their parents had been slaves. Their grandparents, their great-grandparents had been slaves. Everybody was slaves. That's how do you get your head? How do you change? So let me tell you a story that happened to our family 3.5 years ago. 3.5 years ago, our youngest daughter landed up very not well, and she landed up on a ventilator for a week. And as a parent, you can well imagine that one of the most difficult things, one of the most gut-wrenching experiences is to watch your own child lying on a ventilator. And she had been sedated for a few days. And in order to wean her off the ventilator, the first thing they had to do was wake her from the sedation. Only once she was awake and able to start to breathe, then they could remove the machines that were helping her to breathe. So they stopped the sedation on a Wednesday afternoon. And they told us, on average, when you stop the sedation, it takes between 2 to 4 hours because of the amount of days that she had been sedated. So between 2 to 4 hours, we could expect her to wake up. And they told us we should sit there next to her, we should hold her hands, we should sing to her, we should call her name. And within 2 to 4 hours, she'll start to wake up. That was on Wednesday afternoon. We sat there the whole Wednesday, the rest of Wednesday. We sat there the whole Thursday. We sang to her, we called her name, we said Tehillim. Nothing. No response. Nothing. Friday morning, the doctor came in and he said, look, I think we're going to have to start sending her for brain scans. Something's not right. This should never happen. She should have woken up already. I'm going to wait literally a couple more hours. If nothing changes, we're going to start to do all these tests. Needless to say, obviously, we were very on edge. And we continued all the things that they told us, calling her name and singing and saying Tehillim. And so it went through half the day on Friday. And then without any warning, without any introduction, without any clue that anything was going to happen, the next thing, she opened her eyes. And from there, her recovery began very, very quickly, in fact. So I was thinking to myself afterwards, this was just over a week before the Kinus HaShluchim that year. So a few days later, I had the opportunity to stand at the Oyel. And a couple of days after that was the Kinus. And I was thinking then, it was the first time I had an opportunity to reflect on it. So I was thinking, there you are sitting. The doctors told us, here's the time frame. This is the time frame by which your daughter should wake up. And it didn't happen. And not only did it not happen, the doctor started to doubt himself. The doctor started to believe that something was wrong, that the process wasn't going to happen. But we couldn't have that doubt. We had to have absolute bitachon. We had to have absolute confidence that she was going to wake up. And so we continued. We didn't go home and say, well, come back, call us when she wakes up. Or the doctor said 4 hours, and that's it. It's 5 hours now. We're giving up. Sorry, it's not happening. We didn't have a choice because it's negeya b'nefesh. It's something that you care about at the core of your being. You don't have a choice. You cannot give up. You have to believe absolutely, because there are things happening inside her body as it's flushing out the sedation that we're not able to see with our eyes. And just because we're unable to see those things doesn't mean they're not happening. And I felt that was a pretty powerful mashal for the idea of the Rebbe having told us that we're living in Yemois Moshiach, and Moshiach is here, and we just have to open our eyes. And the idea that everything is done, and kolu kolak kitzin. And then we say, okay, so you said that, so we're supposed to wake up, right? We're supposed to wake up. And then, in the blink of an eye, 30 years go by, and people turn around and they say, what happened? The Rebbe told us a Gulf War that was more than 30 years ago. The Rebbe told us about the collapse of communism 3 decades ago. What happened? When are we waking up? And you start to feel, who says we'll ever wake up? Chas v'sholem. People start to think that way. People start to use all kinds of expressions that we should never use. So the difference between us sitting at our bed, the bedside of our daughter in hospital, and we as Hasidim, is that in our scenario, the doctor didn't know what to say. And he couldn't show us, look, here is a sign, and there is a sign, and this is how you should think. All he could say to us was, let's hope, let's pray. But the Rebbe told us differently. The Rebbe told us this is what you need to look for. This is how you wake up. You don't just sit back waiting to wake up. This is how you wake up. We had a conversation in our Chabad a few years ago. It was a really interesting farbrengen where there were guys sitting around the table. Many of them are not Shomer Shabbos necessarily. And they were saying how much time, they were discussing between themselves, how much time would they like to have as a warning before Moshiach comes, just to get themselves ready? How much time do they need? It was really interesting. This person said he needed a month. That person said, one guy put up his hand and he said, I just need 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes warning that Moshiach's coming and I'm good. And subsequently, this was already a few years ago, subsequently, he often says to me, Rabbi, just remember, I only need 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes warning and everything will be fine. Sometimes you see the pashata emuna of our chevra, like we're over sophisticated and they really believe this stuff. We tell it to them and they believe us. News, Moshiach coming, we're just going to talk. Give me 5 more minutes. The world is ready. The world is absolutely ready. It's a fascinating thing. Somebody told me from Torah Cafe, one of the chevra who runs Torah Cafe, that any video they have on Torah Cafe that has the word Moshiach in the title has double, triple amount of views of every other video. It's unbelievable. So the world is ready. We're the ones who have to kind of get our heads right. We're afraid, maybe I'm going to say something, people are going to think I'm a radical, I'm a meshugana, I'm out of touch, I'm not sensitive enough. People realize what they're going through. At the beginning of coronavirus, I think people started to realize that all the things they put faith in have failed them. The great science of the world failed them. The great political parties failed them. The great world economy failed them. And so we're the only voice that could tell them, listen here, this is, the Maharal has a very interesting insight in Perek Chelek, where it has all of the different predictions, what's going to happen before Moshiach comes. The Maharal asks a simple question. Why are so many of those predictions so negative? Right? What does it say is going to happen? Tichle pruto minakis. No one's going to have any money anymore. By the way, you don't have to panic about that because the Ben Ish Chai said that when they moved from coins to paper money, that was already the fulfillment of Tichle pruto minakis. So I'd love to know what he'd say about Bitcoin. So what does it say? There'll be like this economic collapse. Hamalchus tehafech leminus. Minus, the Maharal says, Amin is meridim v'loi mailin. It means he's not even alive. The whole malchus, the whole governing entities of the world will collapse completely before Moshiach comes. Why? Why does that have to happen? Why does it say, Bas kama be'ima kala b'chamoisa, that a daughter will stand up against her mother and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law? Okay, big deal. What do you think? That never happened before? Look, you will see when you vamos, you see tzoros, mothers-in-law, daughters-in-law. I think it's the daughter-in-law, like in the royal family. That's the siman of Moshiach. Kala b'chamoisa. So why does there have to be all of this collapse? The Maharal says because the principle of all real growth is yesh v'yesh v'ayin be'emtza. That the entire infrastructure of the world as we know it has to collapse to make way for the new and radical infrastructure of the time of Moshiach, which will be a completely different reality. So it's like we are learning Chassidus about the idea of nar dinur, and the idea of breaking down soiser amenas livnois, that in order for the world to be ready for what's coming next, everything that we know and that is familiar to us and that we have relied upon collapses. And then once that collapses, then you could build something which is be'ein aroich, completely different. So when we talk about this idea of how do you change a mindset, it's interesting. There are 2 ways to change a mindset. The first way is there's a sur meirad, break down all of the trust that we used to have, al tiftuchu b'nedivim, all the trust and belief that we used to have in the wonderful, great systems of our world. And I think we're a little bit more susceptible to it as Lubavitchers, because the Rebbe encouraged us to use technology and to see the Zohar Noach about how the wisdom of of the world is going to be a forerunner to Mashiach. So for us, all the development of science and technology and all of these things, these are simanim of Mashiach, which is true. But then we become susceptible to start believing in all of these things. We start to believe in the technology. We start to believe in the great, wonderful things happening in our world and believe that this is the politicians and this politician was successful in doing this that no previous politician could do. And look what's happening in Eretz Yisrael. And look what's happening with Abraham Accords. And wow, it's unbelievable. These things are all true. We just are susceptible sometimes to not making that switch to recognize what's happening in front of our eyes. The collapse of systems as we know them is only there in order to produce the ultimate system, which is Umala Oretz De'as Hashem, which is the system of Eibishter in this world. So just maybe to go back for 1 second, even before Rabbi Butman's question, to something I wanted to share just before that. The Rebbe told us that everything that we need to do in order for Mashiach to come has been done. even to the point that avodas habirurim is already complete. And many people have a difficult time with that. What do you mean avodas habirurim? What exactly are you talking about? How can avodas habirurim be complete? Does that mean we don't have to be mekadesh atzmei memutalach? What does it mean? So what did the Rebbe say? The only thing left is lekabel pnei Moshiach b'poel mamash, to actually be mekabel pnei Moshiach. So let's use a mashal that we could relate to. The mashal is you're having guests for a Shabbos. Okay, maybe half of the crowd, the Ezras Nashim, might relate to this a little bit better than the other half of the crowd. So you're having guests for a Shabbos, right? So the guests are supposed to come at a particular time. They're coming to stay the whole Shabbos with you. So in order for you to be ready for the guests to come, you have to go to the shops. You have to buy the things that you need. You have to cook. You have to prepare the room that they're going to be staying in. You have to make sure that you're ready for Shabbos, that you've taken a shower, etc., etc. By the time they ring your doorbell, that's the time you have to be mekabel pnei your guests. At that point in time, what are you doing? You say, "Oh, hang on a second, come in." And while you're bringing them through the door, maybe some people feel this is a bit too close to home, but while you're bringing them through the door, so you're quickly rushing, putting the last things together in the kitchen. No, make yourself at home. You rip something off the couch before they could sit down because you didn't prepare it properly. No, sit over there. Actually, don't sit there. Sit there. Your room is almost ready. Just put your bags in the hallway. In the meantime, we're nearly there. That's not Kabbalah's panim. Kabbalah's panim means all of those things are ready. All of those things were taken care of before. Kabbalah's panim means that when they walk through the door, you are ready to greet them. You're ready to usher them with your full attention. You're ready to speak. You know who your guest is, so you know what kind of things they're going to be interested in. So you're already kind of thinking along those lines. You've made the kind of dishes that you know that they enjoy, etc., etc. Or maybe to use the other mashal that I used before. When we had our daughter lying over there on life support, we didn't have anything to do. That was the medical team's responsibility. They're the ones who had to make sure that she was on the right medications, that they were monitoring her vital statistics. Our job was that the minute she would open her eyes, we would be there to be makabel. What does it mean we would be there? We didn't have to do anything. We just had to be us. We had to be her parents. That's what we needed to do. We had to be, in other words, Kabbalah's Pnei Moshiach is no longer about what we do. That's avodas habirurim, what you do, how you tackle the world, how you change the world. Kabbalah's Pnei Moshiach is now a question of who we are. Who are we? So do we do things? We do things. We make, we do our token Moshiach thought at the end of Shachris every morning for the minyan, or we do whatever. We get together. We have a fabrengen in honor of Moshiach. These are the things that we do. Kabbalah's Pnei Moshiach is a question of who we are. Who are we? And who we are reflects in how we look at the world, how we read the news, not suggesting necessarily that you have to read the news. There's another interesting debate we had a few months ago in our Chabad. Somebody was very upset at me when I said, you don't have to watch the news. He said, what do you mean you don't have to watch the news? How will you ever know what's going on in the world? I said, that's why I have you. You'll tell me what's happening in the world. Guaranteed, everybody over here will, for sure, you get the WhatsApps that tell you everything that's happening in the world. The question is not to read the news. The question is to know how to read the news. I think it's really fascinating. If you go back to the Sichos in Nun Aleph Nun Beis, you'll see a number of times, particularly when the Rebbe spoke about the collapse of communism, and the Rebbe spoke about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in the United Nations, Mishpatim Nun Beis, etc. You'll see so many times the Rebbe uses the expression that all of these events are me'ein dugma v'hachana for Moshiach. And I'm not sure we pay enough attention to that. Because people get stuck and they say, 30 years ago, there was a Gulf War, therefore Moshiach's coming now. Okay, shkoyach. There are a good portion of Lubavitchers today who were not even alive at that point in time. So how does it talk to me? How does it relate to me that 30 years ago, the Berlin Wall came down? What does it mean? So if you have a look, and the Rebbe uses this expression that me'ein dugma v'hachana, that's the Rebbe teaching us how to open our eyes, how to wake ourselves up out of the slumber of Golus, how to change a mindset that has been in place for 2,000 years. To know how to read events that are happening in the world in one of three ways. The things that are happening in our world, either they're a me'ein, this is already a taste of Moshiach, like the Arizal says on the pasuk Toyamer Chaim Zochu, that just like you taste the food of Shabbos on Friday, you already taste the inyanim of Moshiach even before the Geula. So either it's a me'ein, certain other things are already a taste of what life is going to be like when Moshiach comes. Like the Rebbe said with the rationals coming to Israel, is a me'ein of kibbutz golus. It's a taste of what Kibbutz Goliath is going to be like. Or it's a dugma, it's an example in our world of how things will be in the time of Moshiach. An example, not to say chasron, that's how that technology, for example, is how it will be in the time of Moshiach. It's a dugma, it's an example. So when you have a look around and you see that there's this big, huge controversy now around the CRISPR babies that were produced in China using genetic engineering, but then at the same time you see that they're saying that this is a technology that they're already going to start to use to cure certain diseases. Or when you read about the University of Illinois that were able to produce tobacco plants that grow 40% larger than normal plants. And the next thing they're doing is applying the technology to potatoes and soybeans, because this will help solve the food shortages in our world. So that's a dugma. That's an example of what things are going to happen in the time of Moshiach. And then other things are a hachana, like when the Rebbe spoke about the Gulf War, that was a hachana. Nobody would say that the Gulf War is a ma'ain, that a war is a ma'ain of Moshiach. It's a hachana, certain things that are there to prepare our world in order that we should be ready for Moshiach. And that's how we're supposed to look at the world, to see which, because everything that's happening, the train has left the station, the process is already in play. It is impossible for it to turn back. It's not that the Rebbe said halavai or bimheira v'yomeinu or all these wonderful terms that people use that mean very little. The Rebbe said this is happening and we have to open our eyes, and we're living in the time of Moshiach. So every single thing that we encounter is either a me'ain or a dugma or a achana to Moshiach. That's how we have to look at the world. And if we're able to train ourselves that way, then we are ready to be Makabel Pnei Moshiach. And this is who I am. This is not something I do. I'm going to do another mitzvah. We're going to say a kapitel tilim. We're going to be Mekar Vayid or whatever. This is who I am. This is how I live. This is how I see the world. If I could just maybe round off with a story that happened. It's one of my favorites. So a few years ago, there was a big unity Shabbaton here in South Africa, and they had representation from every Jewish organization, every Frum organization in the town, with 200 students. And Motzei Shabbos, they had a big panel. Everybody sat on a panel, and anybody could ask any question they wanted. And the MC went down the line, so everybody had a turn in order to answer the questions. So we went all the way down the line, like 2-3 times. Somebody put up their hand and they said, I have a question about Moshiach. So the MC, who was a Litvischer fellow, immediately turns to me. I was only Lubavitcher there. He says, Rabbi Shishler will answer that question. Why? Because it's absolutely clear that that's who we are. It's not what we do. It's who we are. We are the people of Moshiach. We are the people of Geula. We have to be those people. And that's what we could do to ensure that we're not lecturing the rest of the world about Geula. We're not lecturing the rest of the world about Moshiach. We're living it. We're living it because we're ready. Okay, maybe some people still need 5 minutes warning. Okay, Mela. But at least in 5 minutes, I have a plan that I know I could be ready for Moshiach. Mitzvah Hashem, just in the schus of the achdus of this amazing event, that alone should be the final catalyst that we should be able to be together with our Rebbe.